Hi, Dolly.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited about this conversation.
Me too. Well, welcome to the Thinnest Veil podcast. I'm really happy to have you. And one of the goals with my podcast is to really help us see the middle places and the places where things don't always seem so clear. And so I'm really excited to be having this conversation with you today to talk about your story and also talk about what's happening in the country right now with the immigration issues that are going on and the protests. So I'm really, really happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really happy to have this conversation too, because I think the more people hear of stories from immigrants, directly from immigrants, the more likely that they will start questioning those things that they've been hearing. And I know that there are some people who are still going to hear it and they're like, oh, she's probably making it up, or this is a lie, or this is an exaggeration, because some people have already chosen to decide to believe what they want to believe, and that's fine. But
I
for
don't know if those people listen to this podcast, so we'll see what happens.
right. We'll see. To those who
Um,
are open-minded and want to listen,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah,
And
yeah.
share this episode.
Thank you. Let's start a little bit for our listeners, telling people who you are, um, and then let's just get into your story of immigration and
Okay. Yeah. So I'm Dali. I am the founder of DaliTalks LLC and the Diversity and Anti-Bullying Academy. I'm a mom of two. I served in the military for 10 years as a mechanic, which is something people are always surprised about. I did some badass things. We can go in. I'm very proud of my military service. But I've always been a helper because I came from really unfavorable circumstances as a kid. I migrated from Nicaragua at the age of 7, became a citizen, served my country. I'm just trying to live my best life. And just despite of all the chaos that's going on right now. So I like to share information to people because growing up, I would find something out and I was like, gosh, how come nobody told me? Like I could have made a better decision, or I could have just chosen something differently. I could have, just having options. It was so
Mhm.
frustrating. And I remember my mom used to always say, she's like, Dali, listen to old people because they've been through life. They know what they're talking about and they can save you a lot of hardship. And I never forgot that. So every time I'd have one of those frustrating moments where like, I wish you would have known. I'm like, I'm gonna share this with somebody because they might need this information. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was also raised to listen to your elders and um, take their wisdom, and I think that's a really good way to live.
Hmm.
So we're recording this on Friday, June 13th, 2025.
13.
Um, there's Friday the 13th. There's been
Also, like also the anniversary of my high school graduation
oh yay, that's amazing.
many, many moons ago.
Yes, it feels like forever, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Um, tell us a little bit about um the reason I mentioned the date is because we've had a lot of protests in Los Angeles and a lot of um federal government interference in with the military, and that is illegal. As we know, the National Guard can't um doesn't serve at the pleasure of the president without governors asking for assistance. And I'm wondering if you would be willing to talk a little bit about just your knowledge of immigration and the military and how those things work together. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about what's happening in Los Angeles.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see where to begin. There's so much. So as I'm watching everything unfold, not just in LA, but throughout the nation and the globe, really,
Mhm.
I see the fear and the concern and the conflicting emotions of doing what you're supposed to do as an employee or as a soldier, marine, sailor, and doing what's right, or like what goes against your values or along with your values or whatever. And all I can say right now is like, thank goodness I am not in the military right now, because that would be so hard to be told that you have to follow these orders to go up against your community. That is awful. I don't know what the general consensus is on military members right now and how they feel, but I can only imagine it's a very conflicting thing. And there are leaders who are going to make a huge difference right now, leaders who know what is unconstitutional, to to give unconstitutional orders to their service members, and what is within their scope of that they should be ordering service members to do. So um, right now I think that service members feel like they have no choice.
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure some are for all of this, because believe me, there is racism and bigotry, xenophobia, all of that in the military, just like the rest of the world.
Mhm.
Um, but I happen to believe that most people are probably against this, just like the majority of the nation. Whether you're
Yeah.
this party or that party, both sides, or even liberals or whatever, Green Party, everybody is looking at this and saying, "Oh, hell no, this is not right. Like, I wanted this, but this is not what I voted for. This is not what I expected, or this."
Mhm.
So right now, I'm assuming that leadership have probably and hopefully had a word with their service members and said, "Hey, these are the orders that we were told to execute, and this is where I stand." Now, if I were a member right now, a service member right now, and I said, "No, I'm not going to follow these orders," then I know that I'm going to be threatened with UCMJ action against me, which is Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is the military's law, pretty much like judicial system.
Yeah.
And the biggest threat is being put in a military prison. You get your rank taken away from you. You're just for not following what they would quote as an a lawful order, but we know that these are unlawful. And what I'm seeing is that whether you're right, like we all know there are certain things that have been happening that are unlawful, but it's like you're being told, well, just like play along. Okay, you're gonna get arrested, and once you get arrested, get a lawyer and go ahead and defend yourself, because you're gonna be able to prove that this is unlawful.
Mhm.
That's an unrealistic
Yeah.
solution, because the government is not following law right now. And I'm
Yeah,
pretty
it's
sure
so
that,
interesting.
right.
It's interesting that you say that because this is actually my husband's former National Guard unit.
Hmm.
He said the same thing. He said, "Oh, I'm so glad I'm not serving right
Yeah,
now." And
a lot of,
also a big chunk of California's National Guard is full of immigrants. Like
mhm,
a huge number of people who are serving in the National Guard in general, but especially in California, is made up of immigrants.
right. It is. And you know what? When I was doing my master's program, that was like 2013, 14. I remember most of my research was based on um, women in leadership positions, because that was my concentration, was social
Mhm.
policy and leadership. And I remember when I found out through my research that the majority of people who enlist in the military at a high rate of numbers is Latinas.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, they're also like the highest number of people in the military who do not retire due to all of the burdens that women have to
Mhm.
carry. And and also like the rate of numbers of how many black and brown people enlist in the military is really high. Of course, like it's not the number one, but it's really high.
Right.
So I can imagine how this is impacting the military and the National Guard there.
Mhm.
Um, but again, back to the, okay, go ahead, try to show proof that you are, well, a citizen, or that you're a green card holder. Um, and so let's say you do, and we know that this has happened. Like recently, the guy who had a real ID,
Mhm.
U.S. citizen, and he was arrested, and then eventually he was let go. But it's like, you are ruining lives doing this
Yeah.
because as a matter of fact, when this all started, I called my employer and I said, hey, what is HR's plan on the possibility, like what happens to me if I get apprehended by ICE? I'm a citizen, but they won't care because I'm
Yeah.
brown or
Yeah.
beige, whatever you want to call me. And
Because you're an immigrant.
right. He's like, are you gonna fire me after the 3 days? Because they're taking their phones, they're not letting people call their attorneys or family members or anything like that. I mean, I've heard of some cases where it's been over a month and they still haven't been able to contact anyone. So what do you do? It's kind of like for COVID, my employer created a new set of like leave for 10 days that didn't go against your sick leave or your, PTO, your private time off.
Mhm.
It was a totally separate type of leave, and that not every employer does that.
Yeah.
So we were really grateful. So right now, as I'm seeing all these people get apprehended, I'm thinking, okay, even if you release them, they've had to probably call a lawyer. That's extra money that a lot of us don't have because inflation is so high, right? And even if it wasn't, it's just a lot of burden, financial burden. Mortgages have to be paid, car payments, kids have to be taken care of, taken to school. The other spouse has to also go to work. There's people with medical conditions. There's so much. So yeah, you're. It's like the government saying is like, look, we're gonna arrest you until we can prove that you are who you are and that you are a citizen or not or whatever. And if
Mhm.
you're good, then we'll let you go. But you're gonna have to stay here and you're gonna have to like it. And we're all like, fuck no. Like, no, I'm sorry. Am I allowed to curse here?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. We swear all the time. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Sorry, I'm just throwing them
No, you're
left
fine.
and right.
Throw out the
But,
F-bombs.
right. So it doesn't surprise me that they don't care because the actions that they're doing right now clearly shows that they do not care.
Yeah.
So I get really angry about this because even the politicians are saying, tell them these are your rights, blah, blah, blah. Okay, do it all. You still get arrested.
Yeah. One of the things that I found really interesting when I was watching the riots in LA, or not riots, the protests in LA, I was I was listening to the police chief talk about how they don't work with ICE, right? Like
Mhm.
there is a separation. And we have that in Oregon too, right? Like the police do not work directly with ICE. And I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about, especially because I feel like you have a really unique, well, maybe it's not as unique as I think it is. Like you have this perspective from the positioning of serving in the United States military, and you are an immigrant. And when you and I talked initially, we talked about the social learning curve, right? Like people
Mhm.
really learning how these things work and how agencies interact with each other and don't interact with each other. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about this idea of people, because a lot of what I'm noticing is that people are speaking about immigration as if they actually understand the process.
Mhm. Mhm. Right.
Um, and so there's that social learning curve, but then we also have the social learning curve of the immigrant and what an immigrant has to learn when they come to this country. And
That's
I'm
right.
wondering if you could talk a little bit about, like, if you could give people the knowledge to understand immigration, what would you tell them?
Immigration is so complex that even the immigrants, as they're going through it, are discovering things and they change over time,
Mhm.
even in that same case.
Mhm.
Um, like I said, I came to the US at the age of 7 with my mom and siblings. My dad was already here. And we were seeking asylum. And of
Mhm.
course, as a kid, you have no idea what the heck that is.
Right.
All I remember is we were apprehended at the border, and uh, for me, it seemed like an eternity. But as it turns out, just like 4 years ago, I saw the paperwork. I was like, oh, we were there for like just a weekend. But I remember this enormous prison, this huge bay with a whole bunch of metal bunk beds, and I got sick. I had a fever, and I remember my mom going to the like metal door and knocking on it and trying to get a guard and asking for Advil or Tylenol or something because she was really scared. And my mom apparently had proper paperwork, but she didn't know what to give them. So that's
Mhm.
why we were held. And then once she showed proof and whatever, um, we were allowed to go. But like my dad had to pay some kind of like fee or something, and we were let go. And she immediately began, I guess, paperwork for asylum seeking, and that was in '86. And I guess like shortly after amnesty was passed by President Reagan,
Mhm.
and it left out millions of people from Mexico for some reason. And what I've discovered over the years is that the immigration system chooses, like they choose how many people from which countries to
Yeah.
approve,
Mhm.
and the most discriminated on are people from Mexico because they're right over the border, and they always say we just have too many of them here. You
Right.
know, so I remember when my mom received her green card. Well,
Mhm.
our because we all got it at the same time. That actually took, I want to say, around 10 years. And this is us doing everything legally, the
Right.
right way, even
Yep.
after the whole like amnesty thing. I don't know what happened. I can't tell you. I don't even know how I would go about to find out what the process was. But I
Mhm.
remember she said something like it was 10 years, or maybe it was, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was 10 years until like we became, or she became a citizen. But I remember that she was really happy. She's looking at the green cards, and our neighbor comes out and she's like, hey, normal chat. And she was like, oh my God, look, we got our green cards. And she was like, wow. She's like, and you've only been here such a short time. I've been waiting for mine for 20 years.
Wow.
And I'll never forget that because I was like, what? I was like, you applied 20 years ago? She said, yes, I applied 20 years ago. And I always have to kind of like walk on eggshells because I'm always afraid that I might get deported. And that was eye opening for me. So my mom waits 5 years and becomes a citizen. And as soon as she becomes a citizen, she requests all of her four kids who are from, who were born in Nicaragua, to become citizens, because you can do that. You can request your immediate family members, such as your mother, father, I believe your grandparents, and your children and spouse. That's it. No cousins, no nothing else. So she requests all of us, all four of us, and then the paperwork took so long that I turned 18. By then, I'm already in South Korea, serving the nation in the army. And my siblings get their certificate of citizenship, and I'm told, sorry, you aged out. You need to now apply on your own. And so I'm,
And you're serving in the United States military.
yes, yes. And I get this letter because, I was like, okay, all right. I did the paperwork. I get this letter saying, okay, you need to come to California to the INS building, back then, Immigration and Naturalization Services, which is now ICE. Um, you need to come in for your citizenship exam. And I was like, I'm serving the nation. Can you just wait? I have like six more months left. Can you just wait? And back then, nobody told me, nobody knew like that in the service, while you're active duty or National Guard or reserve, you can actually get your case expedited through the base so that you can get your stuff done quicker than most people. I didn't know this, so I didn't know to ask. And then I remember about like years later, I was at Fort Hood. I had a soldier who was going through the process with his wife, or yeah, with no, actually her. She was going through the process with her husband, so she was a service member. And she starts telling me, I'm like, oh, you can get this done. I'm like, I found out later, but she's like, oh, I didn't know either. So she goes to a JAG, the JAG office, the Judge Advocate General office, who was supposed to help with stuff like that. They had no idea how to do it. So it's crazy because there's this resource available, but they don't know how to implement it, how to execute it to help. But anyway, let me go back to my story. So I actually ended up having to wait longer. I remember I came on leave from South Korea. I had to go to LA. I was there like at 4 in the morning, and there was like, I was like the 31st person in line already, and the center opened like at 6 a.m. So you have to be there like hours early just to get in. My appointment was like 10, 15 minutes. They asked me the basic questions like, how many stripes are there on the American flag? And do you speak English? I'm like, yes, of course. And, like these basic questions. And they're like, I'm sorry, I have to waste your time with this. I know that you know this, but it's like, I have to. And then they sent me another appointment. By then, I think I got it for my citizenship like until I was already in Texas at Fort Hood. And that was about a year and a half later. So that was actually quite fast because I kept writing them, I kept bugging them. And my case was moved finally to San Antonio, Texas. And by then, my green card had expired. And then I was already married. So my husband's like, oh my God, they're going to deport you.
And
So,
you're serving in the United States Armed Forces.
yep. Yep.
It's two things really strike me about this, Dali, that there's two things that really strike me. One is the toll that this takes on your soul.
Yeah, it's
Like
a
your
lot of emotion.
yeah, like your spiritual health
Yeah.
and that up and down and up and down and up and down. Like the toll that that takes on your heart and soul must be incredibly difficult to
It-
navigate.
It's it's draining because you're just like waiting and waiting, and then you're wondering if they're gonna make a mistake because they're unexperienced. Because it's like they're people too. They make administrative errors as well. So my paperwork took forever to be, moved over to the San Antonio office. And so I'm going to my appointment that I asked for to update my green card. And still, like, my leadership knows nobody's telling me, like, oh, you know what, Jag can help you. Nobody. It's just unbelievable. And it's not like there aren't Latinos in the military
Right,
or
yeah.
immigrants from every country, from many, many countries. So I go, and then, they have the blue bus where they transport prisoners. And my husband's like, oh my God, this is the last time I'm going to see you. So I went in uniform just to, like, maybe this will help me. I walk in the building, and just as I'm walking, there's this guy in a suit who looked important with a little name plaque on his jacket. And I stop him. I'm like, hey, can you help me? My green card expired. I'm in the army. I just want to renew it right now. He was like, oh, sure, come on. He happened to be the director of the freaking building.
Wow.
Yes. And he was like, yeah, come on in here. I was in there for like maybe a half hour. He's like, yeah, the only reason they expire is because we have to update your photo because you were a minor when you got it. And, yeah, they do a background check again just to make sure that you haven't committed any crimes, but that's really it. And I was like, what?
This system is so complicated. So this is the second thing that strikes me because I said two things strike me. One is just that toll it takes on your spiritual health and your spiritual being. But the other thing that really strikes me that I think most people do not know is
Mhm.
how deeply complicated we have made this process.
Yeah, very, very. I mean, I get the national security aspect. You have to protect people. You have to make sure that you're not letting people in the country that have an interest on destroying the country. Um, but you would think by now you'd have a really good system down
Yeah.
with all the money that you pour into so many resources, with so much training, and also like reform is definitely needed because they're using the same laws that they were using back in the beginning of the creation of the United States. It's insane. Um, so had it not been for that guy that I bumped into, I would probably have waited longer. But because of him, he checked me out. My thing got renewed. I got in the mail. I got it in the mail like a few weeks later. And then shortly after that, I got my citizenship swearing in date. And um, it was just like that. And I'm so grateful that I bumped into that guy. It was like the stars and the moon and the sun and the
Yeah,
world
the
were
divine
aligned.
aligned. Yeah, the divine aligning.
Right. So I have a certificate of naturalization, and my siblings have a certificate of citizenship. And I still don't really understand the difference, but from recent news, that was put out by some immigration attorneys. They were saying to the public, if you have a certificate of citizenship and you acquired your citizenship through your parents, like my siblings did, then only DOJ, Department of Justice, recognizes your citizenship and not the Department of Homeland Security. This is what they were saying. So if you have a citizenship certificate, you need to file for a certificate of naturalization using Form N-600, and apparently it's like a little over $1,000 just to file it, just so that Homeland Security can recognize you as a citizen. And I'm like, why in the world would these departments not talk to one another? Why do I need this or that for each department? That's ridiculous.
Well, and I think what you're really bringing up here that I really want people to understand is that we need a simplified path to citizenship.
Yeah,
The,
definitely.
there is no one way to get this done. There's
Mhm.
like you are illustrating in literally 28 minutes how incredibly difficult and complicated this process is.
Right. And mine is one of the simpler ones because
Right.
there's many people with different situations, like people who are victims of domestic violence, who, like this one person I know, she got married. This was like over 30 years ago. She gets married to this guy, Latino, who's a citizen. He ends up beating on her and stuff. She leaves the marriage after a while, and he had requested her to be a green card holder, which she did get, but it took it took, I can't remember how many years, but it's taken a lot of many years for her to get it. And then in order to because the process for her to prove the domestic violence was really long. It's
Yeah.
so much. You have police reports and so much stuff that I actually didn't really understand. And then on top of that, it's taken her 30 years. She just last month got her citizenship, and she applied many years ago because it took so long, because they had to kind of like go back and check that the domestic violence was real, that she has no ties to any like crazy terrorist, or like
Right.
organizations that are working against the United States and all this. And so she's been in this country for like over 40 years, and she just became a citizen. But that's just another case. It's like,
Yeah.
it's crazy. These long wait times are insane. And the entire time we're all paying taxes.
Yeah.
And a lot of people still don't believe it, but the government just asked the IRS to cooperate to identify where some people live, some immigrants live, so that they can go and apprehend them or kidnap them. So it's like, make it make sense, like, and put one and one together. Start doing the, the math, people.
Well, I also think that part of that is the dehumanization. Like we've really engaged in policies of dehumanizing other. We really have been wrapped up in the othering of
Right.
immigrants.
And it really baffles me how much proof we have to show to for them to believe the truth, but we have to show nothing for them to believe a lie.
That's right.
That's just insane.
Yeah. Will you talk a little bit about the social learning curve for immigrants? I think a lot of people make assumptions about immigrants, and
Mhm.
I want to, I want to dispel. You and I talked a little bit about the idea that immigrants don't know the history of the United States. We
Yes.
make huge assumptions that they do.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that, what it's like to be an immigrant in this country and have to learn?
Absolutely. So, and everybody's story is different, because also it depends where you come from, how educated you are regarding world history.
Mhm.
Nicaragua has been a very oppressed country by its dictator leader, Daniel Ortega, and previous heads of state, presidents. So they have done a really good job with keeping people ignorant about the politics in other countries, and they tell you just what they want you to believe, just like what's happening right now here in this country. So I come to the US not knowing what slavery is, not knowing what Republicans or Democrats are. And you're also 7. So, like, at that age, you're not interested. I mean, heck, we didn't even have a television at home because that was a luxury. So I get here and kids are calling me all kinds of names. I knew they were bad because it felt wrong, and like they used to say it with hate or like sarcasm and stuff.
Mhm.
One of those words was N-word. So I'm playing tetherball like any other kid. I whoop this girl's ass. She gets mad. She happens to be black, and she's like calling me the N word and telling me to go back to Mexico. And I'm like, where is Mexico? What is that? Like, I had no idea. Um, and I actually told, because I'd heard people say this, you know, and I said, you go back to Africa. She's telling me to go to Mexico. I don't even know where that is, or whatever. And I called her the N word, not knowing.
Woo!
Yeah. And I had no idea. I'm like, she's calling me that. I'm gonna call her that. Whatever. So we get pulled into the principal's office, and she sits us down. And I love how she did this now in hindsight. You know, like I don't think a lot of people would have approached it this way, but she sits us both down and she's like, "Now, Calandria, why did you call Dali this? Do you know where Mexico is?" And she's like, "No." And she called, you know, she's like, she asked me, why did you call her to go back to Africa? And why'd you call her the N word? I was like, well, she called, you know, and I explained. And she's like, do you know what the N word means? And I said, no, but I know it's bad. And she's like, why do you know it's bad? She's like, because she just like says it like when she's angry to me. And then she starts telling me that is a really horrible, bad word. It's racist. And I'm like, what is racist? I don't understand this. What is this word? And she starts going into a little bit of slavery. And I'm like, slavery? I was like, I still didn't comprehend it.
No.
And we apologized to one another, like, and we were sincere about it, and we never had beef after that. But I was like, oh, okay, so this word is really hurtful to the Black community, and I should never say that again. And then she was surprised when the principal asked me, it's like, so where are you from? I'm like, I'm from Nicaragua. I don't know where Mexico is or what that is. And the girl's face was very like, what? Like she had no idea. So we're
Yeah.
both two ignorant little kids, you know, just learning through this whole
We're
thing that
related
happened.
to each other. Yeah.
Right. And then I get to sixth grade, and back then it was junior high. And one of my classes is playing a movie called Roots. And
Mm.
this movie's played for the entire week, and it was so intense. And I'm just crying. Everybody in there was like crying or trying not to cry. And I'm just pissed because I'm like, how is this? Like, you're telling me this is real? It's not just a movie? And I'm just like, what? And now it starts connecting the dots why Calandria called me the N word and why it was bad for me to call her the N word or anybody else. And the history of that word and all the hate and the just the history of racial relationships in the United States. And I'm just like blown away.
Well, and I think this is the thing. This is really why I wanted to bring it up because on the other side of the social learning curve, especially, I see this so much in the liberal progressive community. The assumption that people know the history of oppression of the United States,
Mhm.
especially that immigrants know the oppression of the United States. They
Mhm.
don't, they don't
No,
know anything. She didn't even know what country you came from.
exactly. I
And the
mean,
assumption that we
growing,
just know and that people are just gonna know,
yes,
I think
oh,
is why, and I talk a lot about this on this podcast, like part of, and it is a podcast about the mess, right? Like we live in a messy space most of the time. And that's why I refer to the soul, because I think the soul is our anchoring to this experience on earth. And and we complicate it by assuming things about other people.
yes, that's such a huge mistake.
It's
Because you
such
know
a
what?
problem.
Right, right. Because if you think about it, right now, there are people in the West Coast who have no idea of certain small cultural things from the East Coast or from the South.
Yes.
And they don't comprehend, like a lot of people in the United States say, oh, we don't have an accent. You absolutely have an accent. We all have one.
Yeah.
Just because you're used to hearing it within your circles.
Mhm.
within your state doesn't mean you don't have one. Go to Louisiana. You're going to hear your accent and you're going to hear theirs. And
Yep.
you're going to go over there saying, "Oh, they have an accent." No,
But you both do.
you both do. I remember I was in the military and I had this friend. Her name was Fred. And she was from the Caribbean. I think she said St. Lucia. And then I had this other friend. His name was White, Sedgwick White. I'll never forget him. Love that kid. I wonder where he is. But anyway, he was from Louisiana. And so we had this conversation, and they're both black, okay? And she's like really, really dark. He's like lighter, and then there's me, and then there's like this other guy, Keys, I remember his last name was, and he's like light skinned black from Mississippi. And we're all having this conversation, and we're talking about our experience in the military, like experiencing new things and new people. And Key says, "Well, I grew up in Mississippi on a watermelon farm, and I had never seen white people, like real white people, until I got into the army." And I was like, "Woo, wow!" Like he was elated because he's like, "Oh my God, they're like they're not in TV, just on TV." And I'm just like, "What? That's crazy!" Because in
Wow.
Nicaragua, we have black people. We have people of all shades. So it wasn't like I come from this place. I'm like, "But you're from the U.S. and in Mississippi." But like, wow, you must be in a real remote place in Mississippi. You've never seen white people or any other people aside from black people. Then White says something, and we're joking, and he's like, "Yeah, well, I'm from Louisiana, and people can't understand me because like when I say scrimp," and I'm like, What was it?" He's like, he said, "It sounds like scrimp," or I still can't say it the way he did. And then Sergeant Hunter, who was another guy, he kind of overheard and he's like, "He means shrimp." It's like, "He's from the South. That's how they say it." And I was like, "Oh," all of us are like, "Oh." And Keys was like, "Yeah, yeah, I figured." And then Fred is like, "Oh." He's like, and somehow the topic of African American came up, and he's like, "Well, we're African American, except, her, me." And so Fred says, "I'm not." He's like, "What do you mean you're not?" And these are two black people telling this other black person, "What do you mean you're not?" She's like, "I am from the Caribbean. I'm from St. Lucian. I am not African American." He's like, "But you're black. Look at you. You're darker than me." And I'm just like baffled because I'm witnessing this and I'm
Yeah.
learning along too. And I'm kind of embarrassed. Actually, I'm very embarrassed. I'm ashamed that I did not know the difference because it clicked then. I'm like, "Oh my God, no, she's not African American. She is black."
Right.
And she
Right.
doesn't identify just as black, she identifies as Caribbean.
Caribbean.
So,
Which, by the way, is a whole nother conversation. We could probably get into this all day,
yeah.
but this is also the erasure of indigeneity,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because
Mhm.
there are indigenous people from the Caribbean,
Right.
and just like there's indigenous people from Nicaragua, and
Right.
like just like there's indigenous people from here.
Yeah.
And
So,
oh,
yeah, so
I
Fred's
love
like
that you said that.
educating us at this point, and I was like, "Oh, that makes sense why she has an accent, like a pretty heavy accent." It was beautiful. I loved it. But we all learned something that day, and I was 20 at the time. And I was so ashamed that I was like, "Wow, at 20, I just learned that not all people who appear to be black identify as African American, or it could be African American, it could be black, it could be Caribbean, it could be." She said there was another one. Hold on. Uh, shoot, there was another word she used about the Caribbean. It was like indigenous something, or I can't remember what it was. So um, it's really hard for an immigrant to come in here and be told, "Hey, you have to assimilate." And assimilation is also pretty much telling us you have to do away with some of your stuff, which is not fair. And you have to kind of like become like us. And there's no reason for that. Instead of saying we're just going to accept you as you are, this is how we do certain things, but like we welcome your methods too, or whatever. And there were many little things like that that happened throughout my life. Like I remember I had this idea because this is just ingrained in us, that white people are like good people, that they're successful, educated, they're not mean. And you get to the United States and you see these white people doing horrible things. And we're like, "Wait a minute, this is not what we were told." And some people, in certain countries or even within the United States, they elevate whiteness so much. And it's like it's crazy. Or like I remember one of the things that I was always told was like white people are loose. They are immorally like sexually too liberal and blah 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 blah. And then I'm going to school with these kids. I'm like, these kids are just like me. So it's not just having to unlearn certain stereotypes about ourselves, but also other people from other races and other ethnic groups.
Well,
And
and what you're really highlighting too, Dolly, is that dehumanization happens across the board.
yes,
And what does it mean to be like us?
exactly. Because,
Like,
yeah, because right now, everything that's happening is, you have to be an American. Okay, describe American. Because
yeah.
I can tell you what a Nicaraguan is, like there's very specific things about Nicaraguans.
Yeah, but the way I define American as a native person is totally different than my husband, who's a white guy.
Exactly. Right. And
Right?
like, tell me, what is your American food? Because for Nicaraguans, it's gallo pinto with some yuca and some fried plantains. And what is what is American food?
Well, it
You
depends on
know?
where you are, right? Like if you're
Yeah,
in Utah, it's funeral potatoes, and if you're in Louisiana, it's shrimp, and if you're in
exactly.
Maryland, you're eating crab cakes. Like, and if
Yeah,
you're in California, you're eating like, tacos. Like
right,
it's different depending on where you are.
right. And the other thing that I've also noticed is like there's this arrogance within some US Americans uh, that is kind of, I think they don't see it in themselves. Like believing that this is the only place where only people's dreams can come true is absolutely not true.
Yeah.
Believing that this is the greatest, most freedom giving nation in the world, it is not true. Like I love this country. I definitely fought for it. Um, but I know it's not perfect. Just like family members, you love some family members, but man, sometimes you want to punch the crap out of them because they're acting up. So I'm not here to disparage the United States. I'm here to just clarify that we're not perfect and that we need to look after one another instead of comparing ourselves and like it's some type of competition. It's
I'm
not.
I'm really excited we're having multiple conversations about immigration because
Yeah.
I can't wait for us to talk again about some of the other stuff we brought up. As we're wrapping up this conversation, um, and we're reflecting on everything we've talked about today, what is something you really want to leave with the people who are listening right now?
Um, I think that we are living in a world or an era where there's a lot of lack of empathy. And I want you to think this way. If you are not willing to swap places with the oppressed people, whether they're brown or black or Asian or a woman or a person with disability, then you need to do better.
Mhm. Yeah.
And you need to also take action. I mean, I know that protests are not going to be the solution. I know that signing petitions are not going to be the solution. There's more. You have to, honestly, I don't even I don't have the answer, but I know that there has to be action. I appreciate everybody that's protesting. I think it
You got to
definitely
get to know
shows.
your neighbors. Like some people
Right,
can't protest. Like you brought up people with disabilities. Like some people can't protest
right. Or they just simply
or it's
can't get
not
to one of
safe.
the, right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But speak up like form alliances, know who's got your back, and tell people that you have their back. It just comes down to kindness. And remember that the more that we speak up, the more afraid the opposition, is. They may not show it and they're going to keep pushing back, but there's more of us
Yeah.
than there is them.
Yeah. Dali, thank you so much for your time. If people want to learn more about your work, where can they find you?
They can go to DaliTalks.com and they can also follow me on Instagram. My handle is DaliTalks, and that's DALIT as in Tom, ALKS.
Thank you so much, Dali. I'll see
Thanks.
you soon.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Goodbye.